Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. Welcome to this week's conversation. I'm super excited about this conversation because it's just a chat between two girlfriends, kind of about what I've been mulling over about this whole idea of masculine and feminine and my health and how I'm feeling. And so I've brought a dear friend of mine on today who I really enjoy her perspective because she used to work in the medical world as a physiotherapist, and then has now started to integrate her profession into more of a holistic lens as a light language practitioner. But yet still really holds these strong roots in wanting to understand things and to dissect things and very much that science brain. So her and I often, when I have questions, I will contact her, and she's the good balance of like bringing all the research to me, helping me mull through it, but then flipping the perspective as well. So today it's all about, revisiting that conversation that I released last week about is our healthcare and is our healing processes or procedures that we're used to very much integrated into a masculine lens? And is there space or room, or are we moving into a lens where we're going to see more feminine energy coming in? So this week, I would love to introduce you to my dear friend, Heidi Mason. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. I love it when you first asked me, and I hadn't listened to your podcast yet, to come on it. My first instinct at first was like, oh, but what are we going to talk about? Or what might I say? And then I kind of laughed, and I'm not usually short on things to say once we get going. So I'm like, okay.
No, not at all.
Show up on things to say. Yeah. So thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for having me. And
I think that you'll bring a good balance. Like, I think last week when I released the episode, it was really me being in this pondering state of like, just reflection. Like I didn't have answers. It was just, as I was speaking, I think my truths or what my beliefs were coming in. And so I'd really love to dissect it with somebody else and to kind of see like, is there something more to this? And I know that you've also run across your own challenges with the healthcare system, in particular when it comes to your health and your hormone health and really having to self-advocate. And I think that it's beautiful that because you worked in those settings, because you used to be very much in that environment as a career, that even you've been able to sense and feel that you've hit walls when it comes to your health, but then you've also found resources and tools to reclaim that empowerment. And that's really what I would like a lot of the women to walk away with today is like, even though we may not have the answers, even though this may be the system that we're in, what are some tools so that we can get our needs met, so that we can feel visible, seen, heard, validated, and that we are taking care of our health because it is very different than men's health. And last night, Heidi and I quickly talked about, what exactly is it that we want to visit in this conversation or the different angles. And one thing that came up in our conversation that I thought was really helpful, and then it was like an unexpected little present that came out of our conversation, was thinking about the fact that what we know as medicine right now is perhaps maybe be trying to survive in a modern system that really doesn't support it anymore, right? That maybe medicine hasn't grown with the times, with the modern world that we're now living in. Because when you look at the history, there was a time when, going to post-secondary, becoming, a specialist in something did give you that authority, did give you that hierarchy, because that wasn't an opportunity that everyday folks could get access to. Not everyone could go to university. Not everyone could become a doctor. Like those professions were usually of elite status. And so for peasants or for, your lower or middle class, they needed those professions because there was no access to that knowledge. But we have Dr. Google now. We have all the information at our fingertips.
We do. Well, and I think, when I was listening to your podcast, I had all kinds of thoughts and things that came up. And even for me, not that they were like clear, like right answers or solutions, but all kinds of like back and forth and this and that. And there's this, but there's also this. Like, and I feel like that's where this conversation is a lot right now. But like, there's this and there's this, and there's going to be no like sort of clear answers. But I think one of the biggest things that came up, or I guess I felt like I wanted to share from my perspective, was just kind of like what you said, sort of honoring or recognizing or taking it all in as best we can. I know it's really can be very charged, traumatic, vulnerable, and raw when we're dealing with our own personal health issues and having challenges getting those needs met from our go-to biomedical system. And to frame it, if we can, in a big perspective of where, I guess, again, these are my musings and thoughts, is where we are in the evolution of our healthcare system, where we are in like an overarching view, right? And like, once upon a time, like you said, well, I think, is our biomedical system not kind of birthed from a top-down approach, meaning those that were educated and had the information that were then had the role, and their identity was somewhat based on having the knowledge, having the answers, and providing that to the people that were in need and coming to them for that. Now, prior to that, there was always, right? Or my understanding is, there was always people within tribes, within communities, across cultures, who were the medicine people, who were the keepers of the knowledge, or they had the wisdom, right? The medicine women, the shamans. And so I think that, I don't think we'll ever evolve out of the going to the people that have specialized areas of interest and gifts, right? I think that will always be. Maybe it's gone off the rails a little bit in terms of like sort of power over structures that maybe have also colored the healthcare system, but also that maybe we're in like, a bigger timeline of how things need to evolve, right? Like there was aspects of infectious disease medicine and trauma and acute care services and practices that, we'd be hard pressed to live without these days, right? So it's like, we don't want to throw out the biomedical model by any means, but recognizing what it's become really, really good at. And it was like across the evolution of medicine, it feels like, I guess a bit from my perspective, it feels like we've gone through, well, two things that come to mind. One, we went through a phase where I think the biomedical model got really good at dissecting, got really good at separating and really going in and zooming in and getting a lot of detail and information about specific systems. Granted, women's health was on the back burner, I think, of that process in evolution, right? So I still think it's lagging in some of the areas, but I have hope that it's snowballing and that it's, going to catch up and we'll have it coming out of the dark ages, right? But that we had this kind of this time and maybe the evolution of medicine where things went from maybe being so holistic, right? That then we got specific, right? And kind of separated all the systems, right? Like you have a cardiovascular system, you have an immune system, you have a nervous system, which you do, right? You have a musculoskeletal system, but then really like you get into anatomy and you're like, right, we separated everything to learn about it, but then none of it works independent. Like muscle tissue doesn't even exist without the connective tissue system, without the skeletal system, without the circulatory system. Like it's all totally connected. So then I think we move into, so are we just at that point in our evolution where we've gained so much, right? And honoring how much we've gained from specializing. And now are we in the growing process of now bringing back in the holisticness of it all, right? And I think I said even yesterday to you that there's professions now and specialties that are like psycho, neuro, immuno, endocrinology, like that are bringing back, and people are specializing in more than one system and how they interact, because I think it's just becoming inevitable, because it's not going to work to stay zoomed in only to that lens. And there's a difference between healthcare, right, and taking care of our holistic health, and the management of illness and sickness and infectious disease and acute traumas and injuries, which is, I think, we never want to give up the system, that biomedical system that we have now, because that's what it's excels at, right? Yeah. I would say. So there's that piece of it. And then the other piece was where we are in this evolution, just maybe in general, and bringing back the feminine.
Yeah.
That, like you said, like your sort of inspirations about, this is a very masculine system, that have we needed to go through this phase of masculine energy that built the things and created the structures and grounded stuff in, and did the manifesting and the logic and the analysis and the science. And now, as a natural part of that pendulum swing, do we need to now bring back the intuitive, wise, felt sense, inner knowing? And if I'm not rambling on too much, if I can just carry on with one other insight that I had when I was listening to you, is that then I started really feeling like, oh, the way we're describing this, like the medical model being kind of like the brain, kind of like the logical brain in a way, or that masculine side of it, where, it's been very, and this is very over, like this is broad brush, right? Broad brush discussions, but that it's often rooted in like what we know is possible, what the evidence has showed us, right? What is the normative numbers, and what are the percentages and the potentials and the prognoses and all those kinds of things, right? Which, again, I don't think we want to throw those out entirely, because those are important to drive best practices, where money and time gets spent, that we don't continue to spend our time on things that don't work. But again, we're also realizing, our hope anyways, that we're so unique and individual that those numbers and values, have their value, but if we can put them into context with someone's individuality and how none of that may apply to that person, and I don't know if it's always given a lot of, like with the medical system being more of an in the box, working with what has been known and what has worked, right? Obviously, there's always people pushing the frontiers of medicine, right? But it's kind of more, I guess I was thinking of it or feeling into it as being like what has been possible. Whereas we're moving, I feel like, more than just within the medical system, we're moving into like what else is possible, what else could be happening, so that we're not getting too stuck in the past known, creating our future. Then we're never going to evolve beyond what we've always experienced, right? So there's this like interesting balance, I feel like, where we have to take the baby with the bathwater, not throw it out entirely, right? But then also be able to open up to what else is possible, right? What is right for me, given that normative information or value that I might have received from prognoses and whatnot that I received from my healthcare practitioner, and then bump that up against what feels right for me. So the brain, right, is designed to process data and what's been known based on its past, right, to help us survive and thrive. But then it's the heart that has that wider sense of knowledge and wisdom and intuition. And so I feel like as we become more heart-led as ourselves and develop coherence and harmony between our hearts and our brains, then now can the brain, and I don't know if this is a bit of a stretch, but does that then, I think that we're a microcosm of the macro. We have to, what happens within us is happening in the systems, is going to happen in the collective. So the work we do on ourselves, hopefully going to be helping the ball keep rolling forward in the changes that are going to happen in the systems and then the collective, right? So as we become more heart-led as a person, as a community, as a society, then our systems hopefully going to become more heart-led, which I think feels very much like bringing in that feminine energy right up alongside the logic and the analysis, which is hopefully never going to go away. Because I think if this pendulum just keeps doing this, I don't know if we're evolving or if we're just reactionarily, I don't think that's a word, reactionarily.
We make up words all the time here. It's totally okay.
I love that. I make up, I think you know what I meant. Then we're just...
Made up words are the best. Language always started from someone making up a word. So we're just creating new language.
I make up words all the time. Yeah.
And
anyways, that was a lot.
In what you're saying though, because like even like we know that going one way too much is never helpful. Like right now, what we're seeing is kind of like this crumbling of a patriarchal system, which was us swinging one way really extreme. But if you think about swinging the other way and going into a complete matriarchal society as well, that's not the answer either. There's going to be deficiencies there as well. And so it's about how can we use the strengths of both? And this, I think, is what society used to be about. I have no idea, unless if I can tap into some past lives.
Yeah.
But I would have no idea if this is truly how it worked. But that's how it feels when you look at the stories, when you look at, what our ancestors are trying to tell us, like through teachings from our leaders, and not leaders as in politicians. I mean, as in like actual people who are bringing the folklores to our awareness, is that there was this existence that happened before where we've seen strengths in both the women and the men. And we kind of created these societies where we thrived through balance. And
even just the feminine masculine energy within whether you were identifying as male or female, right? Definitely. And I think that we hear about, I think the fact that potential exists within us, that we have that in our conscious awareness.
Yeah.
It's there from somewhere, or is there for a reason, or is there because this is what we hope to create and see more of. So I think that the work that you do, right, and being able to speak from the perspective and the lens of what it looks like to approach your body with that wisdom and that intuitive felt sense, which again, sometimes cannot feel quite as easy, especially because of how most of us have been conditioned to live our lives, right? It can feel not as quick and clear and black and white and concrete, right? And it's just like developing a whole new skill set, I guess, so to speak. And like what you said, I don't think, again, with the pendulum swinging, right? I think we also, and I would like to, like having worked within the system, like as a physical therapist, and oftentimes physical therapists work in private practice, but I happened to work for my 10 years in a hospital setting. So I was working right alongside doctors and nurses and respiratory therapists and occupational therapists and LPNs and dietitians and like so many people that are working within, our funded healthcare system. And we really want to give that props. Like we don't want to just throw out and come down too hard on the medical system either, right? Because it's very easy. Like we can have a tendency to take for granted what we've always had, right? Yes. It can be very easy to come at it as being all like, this is the problem and the issues. And it's not going to totally serve us to get too bogged down in focusing all of our energy on the resistance and towards that, right? And because we are going to need and we're going to be grateful for. And I think if we didn't have the system we had, it would change our perspectives drastically. Not to say that we should settle for less than what our hearts and our bodies need and want to continue to be advocates for our own health. So I think we need to kind of, take what's working with us and try to, I keep getting this sense of like, how can we find some neutrality in, it feels like the crux of it comes down to just us becoming more heart-led, becoming more intuitively led and reframing maybe our expectations of what we think we're going to get or that we should get from that system. Whereas because I think we all often go into the doctor's office still thinking, I'm the patient, they're the doctor, and we can kind of change. I think that's maybe like a place that we all need to be shifting, right? As practitioners, as well as healthcare professionals, maybe as well, and as people and consumers of health, right? Because I don't think, we have we definitely have, you said like Dr. Google, and we have access to so much more information. And I would still, if I'm new to that information, I would still want to consult with and bump up against those people who have spent their lives and their livelihoods so much time, both being educated on and working with clients and patients that have these issues. So I'd still like to consult with and hear what the expert, so to speak, has to say without giving away my power, to say that I have no choice but to concede to what they tell me I have to do, even if it doesn't feel right for me.
Well, and you said something along the lines of that, we need to tap into that intuitive sense.
Mm-hmm.
And like the first half of this conversation, one thing that keeps coming into my mind is even when we think about the system before our system that we have now, right? Whatever that may have looked like, when it was more, earth medicine, more of that maybe feminine lens of medicine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The natural world.
What like that existed. What happened was what we see as this biomedicine was birthed out of this curiosity of what was working there, right? Like people witnessed and seen that healing was happening. And then out of that, there was a group of individuals that got even more curious about like, well, what else can we do? Like, what else can we play with? And then that led to this biomedical method that we call conventional medicine that worked for a while because it was curiosity. It was led by curiosity. It was like, we are going to dissect the systems, understand the body, and we're going to create something even better than that was, I think, the thing. If I was to guess, if I was to like poke my predictions. And then from that, like we've been living in that for a very long time now. And what we're seeing,
we need to keep our curiosity.
Yeah, that curiosity that was there, that stimulated that, it's kind of become stagnant. And now we
sometimes, sorry, go ahead.
We see a new group of people now that are more curious again, are going, but wait, I want something different. I don't want birth control because I have menstrual pain. So we have a group of people now that are questioning, and I think this is the health of it. I think this is what's going to create the change and not necessarily dismantle what we call conventional medicine, but bringing refreshed light in of like rather than saying I'm so angry at the system, go, I'm really curious about the system. Yeah. I'm really curious about my health.
Well, and essentially, like if we're all about advocating for our health, then let's cherry pick and take the best of all the worlds. So go with, get what you can get out of it and see what like, because there's a lot of value. There's a lot of information, like, well, I have not had always the best experience with my doctors over my life in terms of helping me with my own health issues. I have friends and family members who have had amazing relationships with their physicians and their practitioners, right? So we all still have it. I think there's still, we're looking, I think a system, issues with the system. And then there's people working within that system that are naturally bound or restricted maybe by the constraints of that system, even if they would like to be doing things differently, right? So like the systems, I think, are needing to evolve and to change a bit, right? And becoming more, like if I would think of what are some of the shortcomings of the system, something when you were talking is when the biomedical model, was becoming sort of the accepted Western medical system, it's almost like, I think there was a going though where it was like the physical was disconnected from everything else that we are. Right. Yeah. It was almost like there was this, okay, here you own, I think there was even, I feel like this was from a documentary and I can't remember the name of it. I think it was from the documentary I Am, where they were explaining it, like in the evolution of medicine, when they got permission to then like dig up corpses, which would have been sacrilegious once upon a time. Right? Because they wanted to start doing dissections because of curiosity. Like we want to learn about the systems in the physical body. It was almost like a discussion of like, okay, but if you find the soul in there, that's ours coming from the religious perspective, right? Like, so there was this like division of spirituality and physicality, right? Where all of a sudden that became sort of the domains of different places. So I think we just have to be mindful of where science or logic and healthcare can become dogmatic to the point that now there's no more room for curiosity because we're so set and this is the way it is. And we're not willing to evolve beyond that, because then I think that becomes disempowering and we're not willing to look outside the box to what else is possible to keep expanding the box. And I think ultimately then that it feels like that, that's extremely limiting. And so if our biomedical system, and I think that people that like working within the biomedical system, they probably don't even realize, like right? That we're working from these perspectives or this conditioning. And this is because it's kind of how it's always been, right? And
I would argue that is also because of the system that's been put in place, that we've given it so much authority that now government officials have also put regulations on it. So now doctors and physicians are also working within a really tight container because of lawsuits or because of they have tight parameters because we've restricted it so much, like you said.
Well, and there's funding that the doctors probably, I mean, I'm guessing this, it would be great to have a physician's perspective for how much they felt comfortable to speak to it. But there's definitely what's okayed by their college, what's accepted by their colleagues to be part of the group, what confines is there around, how the insurance model works, even the time that physicians have to be with patients. They're just, I don't know, I have a lot of compassion because I feel like they're doing the best they can. Having been in a profession where I was working one-on-one and trying to help people in a therapeutic way, my scope was much more specific than a general practitioner, physician's needs to be, a GP's. And even that felt so restricting because the time it felt like that was required to really get to know what was going on and trial. And because it's not black and white, it's not, always just, oh yeah, this is what it is. Right. But if you only have 10 minutes with somebody, you're going to you got to use the tools you have and do the best you can with them within those constraints. So you're right? We need the individual people working within the healthcare system need to be mindful of.
You made a really good point about that, and I've never looked at it this way, that we are consumers of health. So if we see ourselves as a consumer, it really changes the dialogue from being, I am a patient and I need you to fix me. If I'm a consumer, I'm going in there and I want a certain outcome or I want a certain product, and it's okay to ask for that. And maybe not a great analogy, but I'm going in to buy a couch and I want a purple couch, and I go in there and say, I want a purple couch, and they're sorry, we only sell white. I have the authority to remove myself from that furniture store and go to another one to say, do you sell purple couches? And I think what we lose sight of, and I've never thought of it this way, is that as a consumer of health, if I walk into a physician's office and I know what I need or what I'm looking for, and that physician doesn't meet my needs, I have to remind myself that this isn't the end of the road, that I have the authority to then go and seek and be curious about finding that practitioner or that physician that will support that outcome that I'm desiring.
Definitely. I think that's part of reclaiming the power and the sovereignty over our healthcare when we're feeling like maybe the systems in place aren't meeting our needs or not seeing us as more than just a physical being, right? That there's not oftentimes not a lot of room for, not always, but generally speaking, there's not a lot of room for always the emotional and psychological aspects, to be integrated into a holistic, right? We've forgotten the bio, psycho, spiritual, social, social, spiritual aspects of all that we are. And so to take back some of that, you take back the power to be our own case manager, whereas that used to maybe be the GP, right? And I think I was sharing with you yesterday that what comes along with that is us needing to be really honest too about our own triggers and traumas. Because I know from personal experience, having felt very vulnerable, very raw, very at my lowest low over a long history and journey with persistent pain, fatigue, now issues with hormone health, that I have a lot of stuff and conditioning around speaking up within the system to that authority figure, to what I need, and not getting it and feeling completely destroyed by it. Because it feels like, and in a lot of ways still, they are the gatekeepers and the key holders to get access to a lot of especially funded services and tests and right. And so it's super vulnerable to go in and ask. And it's almost like I can see it in myself. I can see how my demeanor changes, where all of a sudden I feel like this innocent little child that's just hoping that they're going to see where I'm coming from and validate where I'm coming from. Or I go in trying to be manipulative, intentionally, not maliciously manipulative, but to try to feed it and frame it in a way that it'll be their idea.
Yes.
So there's no triggering on their part that comes in from me having been an advocate for my healthcare. I've had that where I feel like I've had a doctor that's just kind of oblivious to what is really clear for me. And thankfully I have and educated him for quite a long time with a decent level of health literacy and knowing how to put that into context with the big picture and red flags and all that kind of stuff. So like to shrink back and feel like, okay, I'm going to try to feed this to you in a way that's like passive. It seems like it's your idea, or I've just gone in straight up and like shared maybe I've consulted with a nurse practitioner or a naturopath. And I've had that trigger the ego of a doctor. It's like so much so that then it came back at me as bullying. Right. And so that becomes really triggered ring for them. And then for me too. Right. And I can remember one situation in particular that I've shared with you before, and I won't get into all the details, but it was that situation where this practitioner was extremely triggered by me just asking questions based on something I had learned from a nurse practitioner and from a naturopath. And I realize now, having left there, they were extremely not okay with the fact that I had gone beyond them, which that I feel like that's toxic in that role, and were very much bullying me. And then that led to, I was there for a pelvic exam that was abusive and way too rough. And I left there just destroyed, distraught, like, even though I was like, I'm okay, I'm fine. Like, and spent like a good half an hour in my car, just like crying and let all the visceral like emotion come out until I'd shared with you that then I went to, okay, hang on. I completely let myself. And so I think we have to have compassion for ourselves with how ingrained it is to drop into that power over, they have the information, I don't, and letting go of our authority, letting go of our worth, letting go of our intuitive knowing, standing grounded in what we know to be true for ourselves. I think it's so easy, especially when you're raw and vulnerable, for that to go out the window. And I realized, okay, this all happened and none of this was okay. And then I was starting to berate myself, like, why didn't I stop her? Why didn't I stop that pelvic exam? Why didn't I say, like, I am not okay with you speaking to me this way, even prior to the pelvic exam? Like, reflecting back on it, that's how I wish to show up in the future, should that hopefully not ever to me or anyone else happen again. But realizing that, okay, there's my work to do. I guess if there's a blessing out of that, there's my work to do, is become much more clear in my boundaries and what am I okay with. And that just because they're a doctor and they're meant to be doing a pelvic exam and maybe it's not always going to be comfortable. Like, I've birthed 3 times and had pelvic health physio for over a year. Like, I'm not estranged having assessments of my pelvis, right? So this one was not appropriate, but in the moment it was like, there must be something, wrong with me, or I just need to accept it. Or like, it was all just a blur that it was happening so fast. And I don't even know if she realizes that how rough she is. Like, maybe not, maybe she's ignorant to it. It felt like it was maybe personal, but again, that's all through my own filter. So anyways, all of this to say that, like, then I, came around to realize, like, yeah, and it's hard because finding a doctor right now is hard, right? So we can fall into, well, I have to take this because otherwise I don't have a doctor, right? Mm-hmm. So that piece of it is making things challenging too. As a consumer, we don't just get to go from Walmart to Superstore to Sobeys to Safeway to look for our thing or whatever, right? It's not quite that simple, but hopefully we're in the trenches doing the work to help this evolution. But I can't go back to her. Like, I can't go back to her. I can't condone that. And I need to be really clear in setting my boundaries from here forward on what I'm willing to tolerate from this authority figure who's abusing. In that situation, that position of power can be abused. Like, there is potential for any position of knowledge and power, right, that can be abused.
Well, I think when there is a power dynamic, there is always a high chance of boundary breaking or abuse to happen, right? As soon as we give over our authority to somebody else, whether it is an emotional abuse, a physical abuse, a sexual abuse, we open those doors for that to happen. And so part of being the consumer is starting to see ourselves as equals. And I think this is hard work for women. it's really, this is one of the wounds that we carry in our womb is, I do have a voice. I am worthy for this. I am knowledgeable. Like, we do not have to be submissive to the authority of medicine and I'm not saying that medicine is like this horrendous thing, but knowing that as a consumer and part of our work as women, and what I'm hoping to do as women start to feel empowered by their body and learning about their cycle and learning about who they are and demanding what it is that they need so they feel whole, is that we can go into these power dynamics and go, no, this is what I need, and I am valid in asking for this, even if you may not understand it. As a consumer, we can change the way that medicine is being done. And I'm not saying throw it out. I'm saying we know what we want. We know that we have a voice and we need to be heard. And we see this in the fact that women weren't included in studies and in medical studies till 1993, I think it was, that we were
still to this day, lots of the evidence that comes out, you need to stop and be like, okay, and how much of this was like, what was the population that this was studied on, right? Was it even female? And to know what else is possible, or to hope that something else, like that we know that something else is possible. Like, this isn't okay for us, that we know maybe what we want, or maybe we don't even know, we're not sure what it exactly is that we need or want, but we know that something else is possible.
Yeah.
It feels
and then
like
asking. And that's when change comes, because that's out of curiosity. Like, we've seen the curiosity, how it's changed medicine. Let's change medicine again so that it really brings in a good balance. But one thing that we just kind of dipped our toes in and then we hopped back out, but I want to come back to, because this was so brilliant that you said it last night, because I had never thought of it this way, is
what did I say?
You to share it. Because I was like, my whole thing, because I work so much with women and I sometimes go a little too far of like women power and women not having a voice in the medical system. And you're like, but Kate, if medicine was driven by women in the beginning, I'll let you talk about it. Do you know where I'm going with this story?
This is just, I do. Because when I would teach, I taught anatomy for a lot of years, for a pre and postnatal yoga teacher training program, where we would talk about, it would naturally come up, and anger would come up around like why women's health is so in the dark. And I always am, and that anger could be a beautiful catalyst, right? But I'm also always trying to kind of rationalize or look into like, well, why did it happen that way? And take maybe the charge out so that we can move forward a little bit, or use that anger to move forward. And I'd always try. So this is my own contemplations, but I feel like it would make sense that given, women's status and perceived value by society at the time that the biomedical model began to emerge and evolve, and it was completely male driven, right? Society was completely male driven. And so if all of a sudden you had like the frontiers of the entire body to dissect and to delve into and to specialize in, is women's health going to be the first one for a bunch of dudes to jump into? Just like if this was it was a matriarchal society, right? And it was completely driven, imbalanced by women. I think I said it to you in these words. Would the first place we go be to investigate male junk? Like, I don't know. And I don't know. But so, I mean, take that with the humor that it's intended. But I mean, maybe we would have, maybe that's the first place.
I don't think that's where I would have gone if I was like frontiering medicine. Let's examine the male body and see why it functions. I'd be like, I want to understand. Right. And even if I look at my work, I don't spend a lot of time understanding the male hormonal system. I know a little bit, but I could care less. Like, that's not where my interest is.
We have our own
women to make a change.
Our own biases.
Yeah. So,
right. And so I think some of it is like the product of the times, where I feel like we're moving into, like we said at the beginning, where we are in this snapshot of time. What is the healthcare system a microcosm of, this macrocosm of us bringing maybe just the feminine energies back into balance in everything, right? So, in everything. And unfortunately, we are the boots on the ground incarnate beings at this time that are, on really the cusp of now actually seeing like that we do have the voice, that we have the safety, that we have, I say safety with, knowing full well there's, speaking to where we live and the privileges that we have, knowing full well there's places in the world where women do not have the privilege to speak up and be safe, right? but we do where we're sitting and where we're living right now, that we have the safety to have these conversations and to advocate for our healthcare and then to work on healing our own self-worth wounds. And just to kind of follow up on that, like having some of the history I do, and I have quite a few, I mean, nothing that was extreme is sort of that kind of bullying, physical abuse, what felt physically abusive situation, of being somewhat dismissed or misunderstood. And granted, I've also been experiencing issues that don't fit in the biomedical model, as do so many people. Mm-hmm. Because the biomedical model, again, I'll say this without hopefully ruffling too many feathers, but my understanding in the biomedical model excels at infectious diseases and acute care and trauma, right? Treatment. I don't even know what the right word would be. Reactionary medicine. But none of our chronic diseases are improving, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a piece that's being missed, which I think is probably very much the psycho-emotional, spiritual aspects of things, treating us as a whole being. But going into when I was investigating if I could supplement some kind of hormones, and all directions were all things for me were pointing my own research. That's one of the tools, is to do our own research if we're going to be our advocates, and make sure we ground that research into context of what we do and don't know, being honest, and consulting with the experts that do have more knowledge, right? To then add to what feels the best for us. And as all things were leading to, seemed to me to try micronized progesterone or bioidentical progesterone. And I needed to go in and get this prescription, right? And I did have good conversations with a doctor who specializes in women's health about, what is this division? What is this debate around bioidentical hormones are horrible, or, and we need to do birth control. I'm like, why? Like, why the division? So anyways, as I immersed myself in, had a good conversation with a medical doctor that was not down with bioidentical hormones. I do think there was a level of respect that had I known that's exactly what I wanted at the time that I saw her, she's hard to get into. I think there's a good chance if I said, like, I get where you're coming from. I feel like I need this. Would you prescribe it for me? I actually really do think she would have, because I felt like there was this level of education, openness, respect. It just didn't happen to be till after I had got the prescription from her, and she's so hard to get into, that was a birth control. And again, everything that I had been asking and calling in for me to get clarity was not pointing. It was pointing to, I don't want to do that. So then I was like, okay, I can't go right back to her because I can't get back to see her for months, right? I can't phone her up or get a pharmacist to just send her this prescription for now micronized progesterone, when 2 days ago I saw her and we had a whole conversation about how she didn't think that was the best course of action. So I went to my family doctor that I'd only been to a couple of times because I had to leave this other abusive doctor. Anyways, as I was going in to get this prescription, I was literally, and I think I shared this with you, I was like sitting in my car, and prior to my appointment, like pumping myself up. It was like doing that whole like body position things to get like the proper biochemicals flowing for me to have the courage and the confidence, because I was aware of my tendency to shrink, say okay, and not be able to speak up and really clearly ask for what I want without being aggressive or angry or taking out all my past history on this doctor that I've seen 2 times, right? And I was in my car, and I had to face that, like, okay, there's a tendency for me to shrink back or to not speak my truth or to just take what they have to say. Or I find sometimes the way they're able to say it just somehow just sort of like cuts you off at the knees. Like, it's just like, then I don't have any possibility to keep asking. So I was like pumping myself up, was calling in all my support systems. I wanted all my like ascended masters and the angels or whatever I have on my team, like be there with me to keep me centered in my truth, what I need, and to be able to speak from my heart, right? To be able to speak from my heart and not from my wounding. And I use EFT and tapping in my car to help move some of the emotional charge, because I was feeling like a full-on stress response, panic response in my body, just going in to ask this doctor if I could have micronized progesterone, knowing full well there was a chance that he would say no, because he's from this school of thought versus this school of thought. And then I would have to try to find somebody else and book another appointment. And I was already feeling so depleted that all of this just felt that much more depleting. So I was using tapping. For anybody that's not familiar with tapping or EFT, look it up, because I find it's a beautiful way to sit with, in presence with whatever emotions are coming up, whatever sensations are coming up, whatever thoughts, patterns, old habits, and old stories are coming up. And you just speak to it, and you just speak out what's happening, and you use the body, right, in various acupuncture points to help that emotional charge move through you. So I tried, again, use your own tool before you go into your doctor's office, whatever you have, to clear emotional charge. Then I did some heart-brain harmony work to harmonize my brain and my heart so that I was going in from a loving place with my, I guess, as strong as I could, right? I'll say as strong, with my inner resources being as beefed up as possible, right? And my heart open and the courage and confidence to speak my truth. And of course, I went in, I asked for what I needed. This doctor barely even looks me in the eye. I don't think he even knows my name. He looks on the computer screen. He nods or whatever. And I explained my case. And then I got a prescription and I thought I had victory. I went out to the car. I sent it to the pharmacist. Like, look what I got. The pharmacist texts me back. Thank goodness for a pharmacist that is willing to have that kind of on the fly communication. He's like, that's just another form of birth control. I'm like, what? Because the pharmacist had faxed the doctor the prescription I wanted. So I was alluding to, can you just okay this prescription that the pharmacist has already sent you? Again, without stepping on toes or trying to make it sound like it's not his idea or trigger ego wounds of the practitioner. Like, can we just pat ourselves on the back for what kind of bullshit we need to navigate for our own healthcare? But we can do it, right? We can do it, and we can support each other when we feel like we can't do it. Yeah. And then I went out to the car, and then I sat in the car, and then I was like, well, now what? Do I have to book another appointment? And I was like, no. I was like, and it felt like I really heard all that support that I got and be like, no, you put your big girl panties on and you go back in there and you just say, there's been a misunderstanding. And you just say to the receptionist, there's been a misunderstanding. I got the wrong prescription. That sounds serious. They're going to let me back in. You can't be giving people the wrong prescriptions. So I said, I got the wrong prescription. And I went back in and I said, this isn't what I asked for. Right. And I was like, and he was going through the motions of Googling what medicines were indicated for what he thought my symptoms were. And it was not even clear. He didn't understand what my symptoms were. Anyways, and eventually there's these just long silent pauses. And eventually I just said, please. And I understand that this may not be the protocol or the recommended evidence-based, prescriptive for what you think my symptoms are. But this feels right for me. This feels like I just want to try it. It would be on me. What is the risk benefit? I'll throw that in there sometimes. What is the risk benefit? Is there a big risk for me trying this medicine? Because if it's not on you, if something goes wrong, then maybe there's going to be less resistance to you prescribing it for me. If you're not going to be somehow medically liable, right, in some way, or feel like you're going to be ostracized by your colleagues. And no words, just another thing came out of the printer. And it was what I asked for. And then I celebrated. But It felt like this whole, and then it felt like I had to sleep for the rest of the day because it felt like this entire like battle that kind of got fought to the best of my ability from a heart-led place. And I have to give that doctor credit for being very honest and even showing me what the protocol was and how what I was asking for wasn't what was recommended by his college or his resources and from his perspective and from his training. He didn't try to explain why it wasn't appropriate. He didn't try to tell me that I was wrong. So in that way, it allowed me to be a little bit more grounded because I wasn't getting really a lot of resistance. I was getting lack of understanding maybe. And I'm not on board with this, but it kind of finally got the okay, fine, I'll give it to you.
Well, and I think that's a great tip to give people is that centering, knowing what you need and then asking for it. for myself, I just recently I had a hormone test done. My testosterone on the hormone test, which was a P test, came back extremely low, like alert, alert the medical community low. But urine's not a good sampler or good indicator for testosterone. So blood is better. And so, I had this big discussion with a nutritionist, and then I had it again with a naturopathic doctor to get a second opinion. Should I get blood work done on this? Both were, yes, you need blood work. They both prepped me on the conversations I was going to have to ask for it from a physician, because there's going to be a little bit of pushback maybe. And so I put my big girl panties on, and I went in, did the research, found people that I felt safe and secure with to ask these questions, who helped support me and set me up for success. And then I went to the Medi Center, and I went in with a strange doctor I never even met before, like someone who's not known to me, and said, listen, this is what I need. And the response I got was, testosterone is a male hormone. We don't test it in women, which I've done enough hormone research and education to know that, yes, we do have testosterone in our body. This is not just a male hormone. But I wasn't there to get in a pissy match with him. I was there because I needed this test. I wanted to know my levels. So I could have gone into a power dynamic and fought with him and like puffed my chest up and said, this is what I do and this is what I know. But it was going to get me nowhere. I read the room. I knew what he was not going to give it to me based upon me outsmarting him or challenging him. So instead, what I did is I called up Dr. Google in my head, and I was like, these are my symptoms, and I listed all of them. And from what I understand, this kind of leads to like low testosterone symptoms. Can I please just get it done? Once again, I use the please word.
I love that. I love how now that we're using sort of this like passive please, like, I don't really know, you know best. But I love how now somehow we're using that a little bit to be like, okay, if this is what I have to do, then I'll use how you perceive me to get what I know I need.
He literally looked at me. He's like, well, I'll give it to you, but I really don't know how this is going to help give you any information. And I'll call you if anything comes up on it, but it's not going to, because this isn't your issue. And I was like, thank you. And so he gave it to me. I got it done. I pulled off my own results from, my Alberta health records, took them to my naturopathic doctor. And she was like, he gave you the very base minimum that he could for testosterone testing. Like, he didn't give you the actual one that we were hoping for. But you know what? We got your thyroid tested. We got your iron levels tested. We looked at all these other things. Everything else is perfect, which then goes back that this is the only one that's deficient in your system. So let's work on testosterone, right? And so I guess like this is a perfect segue, I guess, to get into like how we can wrap this conversation up, is maybe for us to list some of the tools and resources that have helped us navigate health as women to get what we need to still exist within the system, because we have to. The system's not going anywhere. We're not going to blow it up, but how we can operate it in it to get our needs met, to get our voices heard, and then to really thrive, right? And the first for me is always safety. You have to find safety. So whether that's safety in the doctor's office itself, if you don't feel safe, give yourself permission to leave immediately and go resource, a second opinion. It's totally okay. For me, a lot of the time, I pay out of pocket to go see my naturopathic doctor first, because she provides that safe environment for me to ask the questions, to get the information, and for her to give me the dialogue needed so that I can be successful in those conversations when I go into a Medi Center, because I don't have a family doctor. That's the problem that we have right now where I live. And so, that's how I create safety in my system, is I do that. What would be a tip that you do for whatever?
I think definitely both of those. And of course, like being this very like left and right brain person, and feminine person, right? I have a feeling of like, sometimes to get the tests that we need and the services we need, it involves paying out of pocket. And then that brings up all kinds of triggering around finances, right? And why should we have to pay for it? Or I don't have the funds for that. And then it can knock us down even more. And I think, again, that all brings us back to healing our self-worth wounds, that abundance, and that we are completely 1000% deserving of all of those blessings and access to the resources to be able to access. I'm going to say the word access again, access to the resources to be able to access these other services outside of the medical model or complementary with the biomedical model. So that would be one of mine, is to broaden your scope of resources, experts that you have to gain information from and gain resources from. And even if they're complementary, I would still, not saying like, even if something's complementary, I would still take it. You still need to take it just because it's complementary. Don't let the pendulum swing now to that must be gospel and infallible, right? Still take that and bump that up against what else you know to be truth, what your understanding is. Ask your questions, do what you can, to educate yourself as best as possible. So widen the circle of practitioners that you have to discuss the topic with from different perspectives. Do our own work to become more heart-centered, to heal our self-worth wounds, and to be deserving. Mm-hmm. And I find like I mentioned, two of my go-to techniques that I can use to shift my energy in the moment are heart-brain harmony, the heart breathing technique from the Heart Math Institute. You can look up, that would be another conversation, but it's very simply just bringing the awareness to your heart, slowing your breath, and shifting, embracing what you would call a rejuvenating emotion, right? Bringing in and creating a feeling of gratitude, which shifts your entire state of being. It shifts your mental focus. It shifts your filter of what you're going to feel. It shifts your system to a state of healing. So, being able to just shift my own state of being in the moment through heart-brain harmony, and even using tapping to relieve my own charge, and constantly asking yourself, is this true for me? Mm-hmm. Is this true for me? Even if it's true for your friend, even if it's true for your friend that saw all the complementary practitioners, right? Still, like, is this true for me? Like that power of one, and honoring your own unique divine design and what might have been the right, maybe your neighbor's anecdote or story helped you broaden your scope of who you were willing to talk to. I don't know. And I guess, and to support one another, I think, to be able to have a circle of people, or even one person that you can talk to and break down to and be vulnerable and honest with, and get all the challenges out. Because while it's possible and we're moving, I feel like, in that direction, doesn't mean it's easy.
Well, and community
to
heals.
Be advocates. Yeah.
I think when we're in community, we feel seen, we feel validated, and that's part of our process of healing. Another element that I would probably add on, because I said safety, and then you talked about widening your resources and not being out of pocket, and some mindset stuff around like that fear of scarcity or that fear of the financial commitment. What I would add on is another layer that I feel is really important, is to understand your body, right?
Yes.
This is all my work comes from, of understanding your cycle, because we aren't taught this, and we're not taught a lot about the medical side of our body either. So get curious, explore, understand your body. And then the more that you understand that, these out-of-pocket expenses that you're paying for your health aren't going to be a one-time expense that is just lost. You're going to invest. It's an investment. You invested in it, and then you're going to take what you learned from that experience, and it's going to deepen the connection within your body. And that deepening of the connection is what's going to heal you even more. So I know, like, on my fertility journey, I seeked out all these holistic therapies because I was desperate. I did not want surgery. I did not want to go through IVF. I was not ready to be there yet. And so I spent a lot of money on all these resources. And the thing is that at the time, my focus was fertility. But once I achieved pregnancy and I was building my family, those resources became fundamental for me to create healthy pregnancies, because I had complications in my pregnancies. They helped me shift my perspective on my health and my kids' health. All of what I learned didn't go to waste. It wasn't just to solve a problem and then that was done and it's gone now. Everything was a building block to me healing deeper layers, and then integrating that as part of my everyday life. How I eat is very different than how I ate before. How I interact with my mind and my body, very different than what I did preconception, how I see my kids' health and how I don't allow myself to buy into fear and how I've become my own advocate. Those are all skills that I've had because I had to outsource out of my pocket to pay for something to give me resources and tools for me to feel empowered, for me to heal, and for me to witness that healing was possible in my body. And so don't just see it as, I just had to pay this big bill. Instead, see it as like, this is all information that's helping you to really create vitality and longevity.
Yeah. Know yourself better. Yeah. Cause that's it. Like, it's easy to say, you just have to trust and bump it up against what's true for us. And then that beckons the question, even if we know that's not true for us, what is true for us? So I think that in inner relationship, right? Yeah. And I'll throw out, if there's room for even one more. Yeah. You call it what you want it, but I'll throw out that prayer, intentionality, get clear too. And don't be afraid to ask physically in front of the practitioner that you might be worried about not getting your needs met, but then being really clear and asking the what else is possible? What would it look like? Where is this going to come from? Show me the people, the resources, and the time and the space and the funds to be able to follow through when that shows up. That's going to help me honor my body's ability to heal. That's going to help me reclaim my energy and vitality and, being one with the wisdom of my body. So prayer, journal. Yeah. You don't have to call it prayer if you don't like prayer, right? You can say be intentional, call it in, journal it, manifest it, whatever, right? Create it, but get clear on what you're choosing and what you're creating and really return to that often and be in the vibration of that.
I think when you know what it is that you are wanting to heal, what you're wanting to achieve, and you put it out there, this is what I'm seeking from a different perspective than prayer, is that, coming back and reminding ourselves that medicine is fluid. Medicine, like once something has been scientifically proven, it's not in the textbook and then we're never revisiting it. It's never going to change. Like, I think we've been taught and trained, and I don't even think it was intentional, but something in our brains, it got settled in there that when we learn something about our body or when we learn something about medicine, that's it. It's the final frontier.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
Not. Medicine is fluid. I remember I did a training once, and the facilitator, who has her PhD and does lots of medical research, and it was for my yoga therapy, she did say, what I'm telling you today was probably from studies that were done 10 years ago and are going to be disproven by 6 months from now, right? Like, what you see in textbooks, what you see in literature right now was being researched 10 years ago. And it takes like 10 years for it to actually go through the research process to become written material. And then within a week, it's obsolete. And this is what I think we have to remember.
So much change. Yeah. The rate of change that's happening right now. And the challenge there is for that to get from research to academia even. And the challenge it is for healthcare practitioners to stay up to date while working 24/7 or whatever with patients, right? Like, so there's all these places where even well-intending, thriving, like, I want to do my best possible job. Like, how hard is it to stay up to date and current on all that's going on, right? So I hope
send your intentionality, your prayers out there, and know that if you don't get the answer there, it doesn't mean that your prayer wasn't valid or your intention wasn't valid. It means that we're on the frontier of discovering the solution, right? So keep seeking, keep being curious, keep digging.
Being in that question. Because even if you don't know what is true for me, or I know what I don't want, what is it that I really want? I keep trying to be in that question of what is it that I really want? What is it that do I really want this doctor to say yes? Or what is it even bigger than that I really want to call that in? I love that you said textbooks. That dates us, doesn't it?
Yes.
Kate, because is there even such thing as textbooks anymore? I was totally with you. I was like, in the written textbook. And I'm like, no, I don't even think they probably print the textbooks anymore. They know it's futile. Because
my God, that must be a huge cost savings in universities, because that was a chunk of change.
It's all online. You can just copy and paste it. So that's maybe it should make it easier for the
up-to-date on the VHS tapes.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen the research. I love it. Oh my God. This has been such a great conversation. And I think Heidi and I could probably chat forever. Like, it's so funny. I could say like, Heidi and I are going out for supper. And my husband's like, so see you in 5 hours. I'm like, no, it'll only be 30 minutes. Like, we could have talked for hours.
It's fun. I don't even know. Who knows what we even said, right?
I don't know.
Look forward to listening to it back.
No structure, which is perfect. I always love having your perspective because, like I said, it's so funny that I think you're that pendulum. Like you were so extreme in the medicine and then you're so extreme into the like spirituality. And now you're like, I'm kind of found this middle ground.
Right. Sometimes it makes me crazy. It feels like it feels like I have a strong sense of both. And sometimes that makes it challenging to like, what do I want? What's my next step? But
I loved having you here. If anybody has loved this conversation with Heidi, she is one of the facilitators on the online She's Revival website, which is our online studio. She does a light language on there, which is very spiritual based. It's very beautiful. It's one of my favorite practices. If you want to get more into the body vibrationally, looking at healing in a different lens, that is it.
Sorry, I should say, without being... just to share that what compelled me to want to make an offering on a weekly basis where light language could come through and channel and support people on their journeys was so that people had a regular tool to check in and develop a relationship with themselves, regulate and play with their breath and their body awareness and the wisdom coming out from the body, and then receive the light language and support. So I didn't say that as one of the tools, but yeah, I'm going to add that in there, a weekly practice. Tool. I love it. To be with me, but some kind of a regular practice to develop that relationship with yourself.
Yeah. So if you're curious about it, she has a drop-in, and then she also has her monthly membership. And then we're still working on getting her in to do some pelvic floor work in the She Sisterhood, videos, some teaching around the pelvic floor and why as women we need to know this. But a lot of what I learned about my pelvic floor has been through Heidi in many, many trainings. So, come check her out on the online studio because she has lots to say and offer on there. So thank you again, Heidi. It's been such a great conversation.
Thank you, Kate. This was fun. I'll have to do it again.
For way too long, as women, we have been guided to hate our menstrual cycle and to curse our hormones. We have lost the art of seeing the inner power of being cyclical. So, if this podcast is inspiring you and waking up a new curiosity of how your cycle can be your superpower, I invite you to check out the She Sisterhood. This is a monthly membership that will align you to your unique rhythm through aligned womb yoga practices, cycle coaching on how to weave your cycle wisdom into everyday life, and to be part of a community of women that are awakening to their inner power. Remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living. And if you love this episode, don't forget to rate and review. I love seeing how this information is transforming your life.